character who is still very much alive, and the other doesn't. And I'm wondering for both of your processes if you preferred it one way or the other.
You're asking me if I prefer it.
I
didn't know what you're saying.
I meant in terms of like research and access, if one or other was easier.
I prefer that the person we're dealing with now was perhaps more alive on the inside, closer to the rest of the flesh and blood people that walk this planet. But if you've seen the film, clearly the loss of humanity is very real.
Yeah, and Maria, what about you?
I am going to say that I wish I got the chance to meet her, because I think she would have said a lot of interesting things. She's been very complex as a human being, and I really wish I got to meet her. Recently, I got to meet, for a short period of time, Nikki Haskell, who's been one of her dear friends. And she gave me a little bit of information who she was, apart from my research. But yeah, I wish she was here.
That was a very tactful answer. And I think the hardest thing with this is that this could so easily be like a Saturday Night Live skit, caricature. So for both of you, what were some of the essential things to make sure you were never veering into that?
Well, there's sort of, kind of the job that we have, which is sort of to kind of put aside our own personal feelings and have to go in there really like investigators and try to sort of look at this like a case. It's a puzzle you're trying to solve. And like any other role, I just really was trying to understand what happened and what is driving this person ultimately. What is he hiding? What is he selling you now? How did it all kind of come about? And what's at the core? And there's a lot of information. There's a lot of footage out there. There's a lot of articles from the time period. That was maybe the blessing here, because there's so much on him that you can kind of really go and do it for yourself if you want. You can figure it out, as we did. I think the hard part obviously was, kind of just trying to open a door for you in a certain way where I know it's already closed before you even walk in the theater, because we've seen all kinds of different takes on this person but never actually something that I think tries to get to the core of who he is, as this film did. And then I think it was just, every day, just for hours on end, trying to take on, what are recognizable features that he has that have been overdone, but do it to some extent where it feels earned and it's not put on and it doesn't feel like I'm trying to replicate something. It's just, you're not thinking about it. It's like learning an instrument. After a while, you're just doing it. And that was, I think, difficult because, it's one of those things where if it's a little bit too much in one scene, then immediately you're out of it. If it's not enough, then you're not really buying it. And I had plenty of people remind me, to Wazoo that I didn't look like him and all that stuff. So I think it was just finding that balance.
Maria, what about for you? Obviously, maybe less of a publicly recognizable figure now, but certainly back in the day.
Yeah, first of all, thank you all for being here. It's right before Christmas. It means a lot. We've been having quite a ride with this movie. A lot of people fear to go and give it a chance, even though I think the movie speaks for itself and it doesn't really take sides. It probably gives you a glimpse of how things happen, as Sebastian said. And a little bit of a glimpse of who Ivana was. I personally wasn't really familiar who that woman was. I'm Bulgarian. I was born and raised in Eastern Europe, in Bulgaria. I knew the face, I knew the name, and I knew that she's been married to, well, we showed the movie, the former president of America and the future one. But pretty much that was all I knew about her. I didn't know that she's been a dedicated athlete. I didn't know that she's been well educated. I didn't know that she's been a competitive skier. I didn't know that she's been a competitive swimmer before becoming a skier. And I didn't know that she's been involved with the whole business behind closed doors. I didn't know that a lot of the ideas of the business came from her side. I didn't know that she's been a hardworking woman, writing books, wanting to have like a whole empire on her side. So the more I got to know about her, the more impressed I became, because, you know, weirdly, I have a feeling that we share kind of a similar mentality about the fact that you're not usually given a lot of chances if you're on that side of the world, in that region of the world, in Eastern Europe. These countries are countries that have been under communistic dictatorship, if I'm allowed to say that. And you develop a mindset that you have to be really hardworking because there's somebody behind your back and they're waiting for your place. So she was that. She wanted to be perfect. She wanted to know everything. She wanted to train her hardest. And similarly, when I met Sebastian, because he's from a fellow country in Romania, born and raised up until you were 6, 7?
Until I was 8, yeah.
8. Yeah. Similarly to when I met Sebastian, but similarly to when Ivana met Donald, I think she recognized like an equal, like somebody that's been very driven, very ambitious, very much wanting to rule the world, which for her case, she didn't grow up there. She didn't know what it does it take to be in that position. For him, I feel like getting to know Roy and getting to know his father, maybe it's been a different situation. But pretty much, yeah, doing a lot of research, back to the question, watching a lot of interviews and reading her fictional books as well. It's been really interesting that to see some woman that's been pretty much outspoken and ahead of her time, it's been quite remarkable and inspirational.
Yeah. And this relationship between the two of them is kind of a litmus test for how much he's changing as he goes along. For you, how much real love did you think was there? And did you think at a certain point that one or the other of them wasn't capable of that anymore? Or how did you find that dynamic?
Look, I mean, for me, you know, I had this ritual every day, basically, when I would get there at like 4 in the morning, and I'd have these 2 hours in the makeup chair. I would watch the Rhoda Barrett 1980 interview that he did, which we kind of have a clip of, and it's about an hour or so. And I'd watch that thing over and over again, and you know, it's tough because when you watch that, you sort of see a very different person. You know, you still see a humanity there, and someone who seemingly is at least aware of, you know, as he talks about it, and in sort of slight vulnerable ways about marriage and love and all these things. And so I do believe, and also if you look at the American Dream, you know, which is on Netflix, and another great book I read called Confidence Man also is really, really very revealing about those early years. You know, I think there was, Ivana and his brother were maybe the only anchors to humanity that I've discovered in him, you know, and I do think that there was a real bond there, you know, and we didn't want to ignore that, you know, we really wanted to kind of try and capture all the sides of this person, regardless of, you know, what he becomes, but it's a tricky thing to talk about because there's sort of this, you know, this idea of like humanizing somebody, and everyone sort of has strong feelings about that. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I would throw it in the mix again in considering that when we're talking about this world of humanizing, that it isn't just sympathy. Sympathy is just maybe one reaction somebody might have. It's also about showing how there's flaws, and everyone, is capable of losing that humanity. Everyone, people are able to grow out of that, as he seemingly did, and I think that's why there's value in the movie, as opposed to, and I want to stress again the word movie, because there's a way of having an experience with these people and this journey that you're not going to necessarily get from whatever news channel you're looking at, or whatever you're following on TikTok, whatever, how you're getting your news bites, and we all know they're hammering us with it. So, but right, I think we felt that there was a real connection there between them, and of course, and the argument can be made that, would he have gotten to where he had gotten at that time in the 80s if it wasn't for Ivana, and who reminded him to some extent of his mother in some ways. But it was clearly when she started to kind of get her own footing that is when he abandons her.
And then in terms of the rape scene, no matter what, filming something like that is going to be a very sensitive and delicate thing to do. There's a whole extra layer here. So can you both talk a little bit about how you prepared for that, and how much all the outside stuff surrounding that weighed on you while you were performing, if at all?
Well, that scene has been existing in the script ever since I got to read it for the first time. We joked about it. We rehearsed physically how to manage to not hurt each other. Ali made sure that on the day it's going to be a closed set, so nobody's going to feel uncomfortable. We had intimacy coordinator, we had stunt coordinator. Everything was very much blocked physically. That's on the mechanical side, technical side. On the emotional level, because it's sometimes scary to do a scene when it includes nudity. It's sometimes scary when you do, an intimate scene. But what's more scary for me, maybe because I'm Eastern European, maybe because I went through a theatrical training, what's more scary is when you go through an emotional nudity. And I feel like that's the core of this scene, and betrayal and heartbreak. Violence should not exist in the first place. Assault should not exist. Abuse should not exist, no matter which shape or form, whether that's domestic, public, narcissistic, doesn't matter, it should not be there. So it's always a challenge to read a scene when it's including domestic violence. It's always challenging to try to be in the shoes of a survivor, and it's always challenging when you're watching it, even if you are the person who's been in front of the camera shooting it. But when things like this happen, and back then, in this year, that's been her truth. All of the scenes in the movie are fact-checked. So back in that time, for her, that's been reality, and she survived. It's important to shine light on issues that usually are hard to talk about, but because we have art, because we have platform, maybe it's important to shine bright light on these issues, because movies can influence the world. Movies can help people actually go through really challenging times and challenging situations in their lives. And if that scene can help people get in touch with organization or a platform or find a way to survive something like this, it's important. As a movie, I think that's not the center of the movie. The movie is not centered around domestic abuse, but it's important for the characters. It's important how relationships shift and how people change and how much that can hurt you to the deepest when you don't when you don't expect it, but when you share your life, when that's basically your life. To be hurt physically and emotionally, intentionally, it's the ugliest thing that you can witness and that you can experience. And that's why I think I value her as a woman, as a survivor. It takes courage to leave a situation like this, and it takes courage to choose the right moment, and it takes courage to reach for help, which she fortunately did in the future. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about this and yet not enough. But I think for our movie, we see like a hole in this relationship, a hole in this human being, a hole in someone else's heart, and that changed the direction of the story of the characters in general.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we set out, one of the reasons I wanted to be a part of this film was because of this director, Ali Abbasi, who I think is a really incredible filmmaker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his previous work. He's done some other films that, before this, Holy Spider, which was also based on a true story in Iran. And I liked him. I thought there was value in someone like him approaching the story because I knew, not being from here, he was really going to go and try to approach this from a non-biased place, and actually try to mine for the truth. And and obviously we had our writer Gabe Sherman, who has researched everything to no end in this film, including that particular scene, which is born out of a testimony that she's given under oath, which she then retracted in front of lawyers, perhaps because there was threats or settlements that happened. But when you make a decision about including something like that, you ask yourself, or Gabe Sherman asked himself, what would be closer to the truth, what you gave under oath or what you did later in front of lawyers, right? So, and I think, as we said, because there were some Republican friends I've had who came to see the movie, and they all said, "Oh, I love the first half of the movie," and it's it's very reflective of selective thinking, which is sort of like, don't show me the bad side, and it's like, well, but you have to really be in severe denial of reality if we're talking about the guy who's on that Access Hollywood tape is saying grab him by the whatever, and then this is completely in line with who he is, and actually very appropriate for the film, and in line with honoring, and so I think that was why it was kept, and we had to fight for it because that was one of the things that our financier at the time was trying to stop the movie from coming out with.
Yeah. Two more questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. Maria, you really became known to so many American audiences through another film involving a member of Trump's first administration. Did that experience...
All these lawyers.
Yeah. Did that experience, did you feel like that gave you any insight that you carried along into this film?
Honestly, no. Absolutely not. Well, I did Borat out of a blind audition. I had no idea who Borat was. I grew up fantasizing about me going to Denmark, learning Danish, because I knew that for me as an Eastern European, having an accent, not speaking the language, it's going to be impossible to be in the States, to work in American movies. So I was like, oh, maybe it's going to be better to learn Danish and move to Copenhagen. And I took myself, my mom and my dad to Zentropa, and I basically begged, I'm going to be cleaning the offices, I'm going to be bringing mail, everything, just to be here and study from you guys, Lars von Trier, Thomas Vinterberg, Peter Jensen, his producing partner. Nobody knew who I was. I was from a small little city in the middle of nowhere, in Bulgaria, for people. Then I did a blind audition, not knowing what this is going to be, out of a Facebook status, written in Bulgarian language from a Bulgarian actor, quote unquote, we're searching for a lead actress for a big Hollywood movie, send us your details, I record something, and then hypothetically you'll end up in a different country. And I did end up in a different country. I'm here and now. Then later on, after like 2-3 months of auditioning, I was told that that's going to be a sequel to a very successful movie, a comedy. I've never done comedy in my life before that. And that movie is going to be called Board Subsequent Movie Film. The movie had a lot of scenes with real people. I was not prepared about that. I had no idea how to interact with people. I just wanted to believe that that's reality. And that's what we did. That's what Sasha and I did. He was guiding me every step of the way and made me be as convincible as possible. Maybe not speaking the language also helped me a lot, because a lot of times I didn't understand what people were saying. But I did understand their actions. I did understand their behavior. And yeah, we had a scene in one very famous hotel in New York on July 5th, 2020. That included somebody also very famous, somebody also a person of power called Rudy Giuliani. I did not know a lot about him. I knew that he's been called the American mayor or the mayor of America, the New York mayor, I don't remember. I mean, that's how much I knew. But following my answer, Borat is a satire. To a degree, we can describe it as a political satire where the focus is not about politics in general. It's about human nature. It's about people's behaviors. So it doesn't really matter, are you an accountant, are you a lawyer, are you a waitress, if your behavior is inappropriate. So having that scene back then gave me maybe a glimpse of like, okay, so people should be judged by their actions, not by their positions. With this movie here, I don't really consider it being a political movie in a way of like taking sides in political parties, because people will leave this alone with a different opinion. But it's a political description, it's a political dive into the underbelly of a whole system. And we see another lawyer in the face of Roy Cohn, who's been also a very important person of power, who's been doing a lot of inappropriate things 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So at the end of the day, it's about a system. Maybe that's the only thing that I understood comparing both movies. I don't think any of my characters have been political, though. But they are characters of strong, multi-layered women. One of them a teenager, the other one just young adult. And they happen to meet some very strange people.
And then for both of you, before we go to the audience, we're about to go into another Trump presidency. After your experiences on this, is there any advice or lessons learned that you can impart to help us get through the next 4 years?
Resist indifference, for one. Because I think it's easy now, and everyone's exhausted. He always said one thing, which is, I wait for bad times, and when bad times come, that's when I know what I need to be doing. And there's footage of that of him in this Netflix documentary, The American Dream, saying that. And that's exactly what he's done. It's like he's exhausted everybody to no end. So now we're all just like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to get home and go to, I want to see my family. I don't want to get, and that's normal. That's human, But I think we have to try, at least for me, we have to try to look at this with a closer lens and somewhat objectively rather than subjectively. We have to try to understand what it is about him that's connecting with certain people. And we have to try to resist, which is going to be very hard, we have to try to resist to attack these other people that we disagree with, or wherever the disagreement is, because divisiveness is what he wants. That's what he rides on. That's what every single dictator, everyone has done. And what he's doing is he's given people permission to to lose their empathy, to lose their morals, to say what they want, to go up to people and be physical with them, to, you know, it's, and I think, you know, what this movie at least tries to do is, because you have to ask yourself why he doesn't want you to see this movie, why he's tried very hard to not let this movie come out, okay? And I think one of the reasons is because it really does show him for who he is. It's not this sort of savior that he's casting himself as. He's an enabler. He's a fugazi, okay? You know that term? Fugazi, you know, Donnie Brasco, it's a fugazi, it's a fake.
Yep.
And you know, and the only credit I can give him is that he's very good at creating characters, and that's what he's done. We've been living with the Apprentice character that's come later, but what he doesn't want you to see is the fact that there's a very deeply insecure, paranoid, very self-driven person that's still living out a revenge tale that we're all being punished for, and it goes back to those beginning years. And so when people go, why should I see this movie? Because I don't want to see him sort of in these ways that make me feel for him. I go, well, then you should see it and ask yourself if you're going to trust this person at the end of the day. You know, so I think there's great value in that. I worry that you know, it's very easy to sort of like numb out and not deal with, you know, things that are uncomfortable in a way. But I think the only, you know, the movies or the books or the creative languages, the only universal language we have with each other, that no matter where we come from, what our upbringing is, our point of views, our belief systems, we can all get that human to human. You know, and I think we have to keep protecting that, especially if someone wants to, you know, put a ban on it or censor it.
Anybody in the audience have a question? I saw you raise your hand first.
Amazing portrayals, both of you. Thank you so much for doing this film. Is there a campaign to get you immunity from Joe Biden before? How do you do that?
I think Joe Biden's got a lot of other problems. I don't know about that, but.
Have you felt threatened at all as anything happened?
Well, Gabe Sherman received, as predictable as it sounds, and again, we go, because we're getting so used to it, but he's received anti-Semitic threats, you know, as soon as, you know, he went on there and called the film and us human scum, you know, which is, again, something that only sort of dictators have used words like that, but it's, right, it's tough to know because it's that sort of bullying kind of mentality that I think we have to keep resisting with, and the work is speaks for itself. The work is the response. You know, it's not about bullying something back necessarily. It's like continuing to shine a light on things.
Yeah, bravo to both of you for choosing to express this story. The question I have for Sebastian, one thing I noticed over time is your subtle mannerisms develop as sort of this character of Trump developed. And so I was wondering, because it was really amazing. Did you shoot chronologically? And if not, how did you manage that visual component?
A lot of Coca-Cola. Really, I'm telling you, because my anxiety levels were so hard, and like I'm getting low blood sugar, and I'd be like, Coca-Cola. And I'm like, oh, it works anyway, it's fine. And I'm like, he probably has the same fucking problems. Anyway, we were very lucky in the sense that he tried very hard to fit a lot of the 70s stuff in the beginning. So we shot this literally a year ago. Like, we were in Toronto a year ago today, and we had a break of Christmas break, and we did a lot of the 70s in the first break, and then we had the Christmas, New Year's, went back and we did the 80s stuff. But we would jump around in the same day. I could be with Roy Cohn in 1977, and because of locations, we had to shoot, like, for instance, the last scene, which